Have you ever walked out of Mass feeling strangely empty, even though you prayed, listened, and did everything you were supposed to do? That hollow ache in the soul, the one you keep quietly carrying home, might not be coming from inside you at all. Father Amorth, along with other real exorcists, warned that some people bring invisible burdens into the pews. 3 of these burdens are so spiritually heavy that simply sitting beside them can drain your peace, weaken your focus, and quietly pull your heart away from the altar. Most Catholics never recognize the signs until the damage is already done. Today, you will discover what these 3 things are, and the 2 hidden signals exorcists say reveal when someone near you is carrying them. Stay with this episode until the very end. What you hear may change the way you attend Mass forever. Before we begin, write in the comments, "Lord, awaken my heart for the Mass," and subscribe to Living Catholic Faith every day. When Catholics step into Mass, most imagine they are simply entering a quiet church. But exorcists, not just Father Amorth, but many who have worked in the hidden trenches of spiritual warfare, describe the Mass very differently. They say it is the moment when heaven breaks open, when the supernatural world becomes unmistakably present, and when every soul sits closer to eternity than at any other time of the week. The Eucharist is not a symbol. It is the blazing center of God's power, the place where grace descends like a living fire. Father Amorth often reminded people that during Mass, the unseen world moves the most. Other exorcists echo him. The devil flees from the altar, but he attacks the distracted, the wounded, and the unprepared. Not because he can overpower the liturgy, but because he searches for hearts that arrive with cracks. This is why your interior state matters more than you think. At Mass, the soul is placed under a light so pure that anything hidden, resentment, agitation, judgment, spiritual noise, becomes a doorway the enemy attempts to exploit. Grace flows, yes, but disturbance can spread too. And as this unfolds, you will see why the storm inside one soul can spill into others nearby, even when nothing is said aloud. Have you ever sat in a pew and felt your heart suddenly grow heavy, even though nothing around you seemed wrong? No noise, no conflict, just an unexpected weight in the soul, as if prayer itself became harder to lift. Exorcists say this is not imagination. They often speak about something they call the atmospheric influence of the soul, the quiet radiation of whatever a person carries within. Peace can spread, so can turmoil. A soul filled with grace can steady an entire row of worshipers. But a soul wrestling with resentment, agitation, or inner darkness can quietly pull others into its orbit. Father Amorth warned that people rarely realize how porous the human heart becomes inside the liturgy. During Mass, the spiritual world is closer, the senses are thinner, and the interior life of one person can brush against another like an unseen wind. Even a single troubled soul can make the prayers around it feel muted, distracted, or strangely distant. This is not about judging others. It is about recognizing what Scripture has taught for centuries, that we are shaped by those we stand beside. The book of Sirach says that walking with the holy makes one grow holy, but standing beside the troubled can leave a mark deeper than we expect. And here is where the warning becomes unmistakable. There are 3 specific interior burdens that exorcists say can spread most quickly inside a church. The very ones that can drain grace even from the faithful sitting quietly nearby. The first is also the most common, and the most spiritually suffocating. Among all the burdens a person can bring into the house of God, exorcists agree that resentment is the heaviest. It is not simply anger. It is anger that has settled into the soul, hardened, sealed, and quietly shaping every breath a person takes. Father Amorth described resentment as a locked door inside the heart. A door grace can approach but cannot enter until the soul chooses to open it. Other exorcists speak even more plainly. Unforgiveness is one of the enemy's favorite hiding places. Not because it feels dramatic, but because it feels justified. Many Catholics walk into Mass carrying old wounds they never released. Betrayals from family, broken friendships, disappointments that have grown roots. They kneel, they stand, they pray, but their heart remains clenched, unable to rise with the liturgy. And those sitting beside them can feel it, even if they cannot name it. A kind of spiritual gravity that pulls the atmosphere downward. Scripture has already warned us. Jesus said that if you approach the altar and remember a brother has something against you, you must seek peace before offering your gift. He was not giving etiquette. He was revealing a spiritual law. A heart divided cannot fully receive what heaven pours out. Exorcists often recount moments when a single person, carrying deep resentment, made an entire pew restless, unfocused, or inexplicably tense. Not through words, but through the silent energy of a wounded spirit that has forgotten how to let go. One elderly man once told a priest that after decades of resenting his son, he finally sought reconciliation. And on the very first Sunday afterward, he said, "Mass sounded different, as if the prayers finally reached me." This is what happens when the door opens. Resentment suffocates grace. And for those sitting near it, prayer becomes heavier, attention becomes scattered, and the Eucharistic mystery feels strangely distant. But resentment is only the first burden exorcists warn about, and the second one is far more subtle, often disguised as harmless daily habit, yet capable of dimming the light of an entire congregation. If resentment is the burden that weighs the soul down, voluntary distraction is the one that slowly pulls it away. Exorcists speak of it as a quiet drifting, a spiritual drowsiness that does not shock the conscience, but dulls it. And unlike resentment, which is often born from pain, distraction is born from choice. Father Amorth often warned that inside the liturgy, the enemy does not need chaos. He only needs your attention to wander. Even other exorcists say the same. The devil does not always roar. Sometimes he simply whispers you away from the altar. Everyone has experienced natural distractions. A crying child, a sudden noise, a fleeting thought. These are human, harmless, and expected. But in every parish, there are people who arrive with deliberate distance in their hearts, scrolling through a phone before the opening hymn, drifting into daydreams during the readings, whispering to others as if nothing sacred is unfolding before them. And that spiritual disengagement radiates outward. Those near them begin to lose focus, feel restless, or find their own prayer slipping. It is as if one wandering mind invites another, until a small circle of people is quietly lifted away from the mystery at the center of the Mass. The Church has long understood this danger. The Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy calls every Catholic to full, conscious, and active participation, not to impose effort, but to protect the soul from sliding into that fog where grace becomes harder to receive. Exorcists often recount that people entrapped in habitual distraction struggle the most during sacred moments. The consecration, the Eucharistic prayer, the silence after communion. These are the moments when heaven presses closest, and yet their hearts remain far away, as if unaware of the miracle unfolding inches before them. Some describe distraction as a spiritual veil. Others say it is like drifting into sleep while God is speaking your name. Either way, those seated nearby often feel the shift. Prayers lose depth, the atmosphere becomes thinner, and the sense of sacred focus grows faint. And if distraction weakens the fire of worship, the burden that follows is even more corrosive, because it does not simply weaken attention, it fractures unity. Few influences spread faster inside a church than a heart that has turned toward judgment. If distraction weakens the flame of worship, there is a burden that does far more damage. Exorcists call it the critical spirit, and they warn that nothing spreads faster inside a church. It begins quietly, a glance of disapproval, a whisper about the cantor, a complaint about the homily, but its impact reaches far beyond the moment. Father Amorth often spoke about pride as the devil's favorite doorway. And a heart filled with criticism mirrors that same pride, a subtle belief that one stands as the judge over what is meant to be received with humility. Other exorcists put it even more starkly. Complaint is the enemy of worship. A judgmental heart rarely realizes what it carries. It believes it is just being honest, or just noticing flaws. But inside the liturgy, this posture becomes corrosive. Mass is not a performance. It is not a concert, nor a lecture, nor a showcase of human perfection. It is the sacrifice of Jesus Christ made present again. And when a soul turns its gaze toward the imperfections of others, it turns its gaze away from Him. This is why the critical spirit spreads so quickly. It pulls attention sideways rather than upward. Those seated nearby often feel the shift. Tension rises, prayer becomes harder, and the sense of unity, the very heartbeat of the Eucharist, begins to fracture. Scripture has been warning us for centuries. Do not judge, lest you be judged. St. Paul says that we belong to the Lord, not to one another's verdicts. The Mass unites heaven and earth, but a critical heart divides pew from pew long before the final blessing. Priests and exorcists often recall moments when a single person consumed with criticism changed the entire atmosphere of a parish. Sometimes it is the person who never sings because they dislike the choir. Sometimes it is the one who watches the priest's every gesture, waiting to find a flaw. Sometimes it is the parish veteran who measures every homily against an idealized past. Their presence creates a chill, a subtle tearing in the fabric of communion. Yet in a moment of grace, even this can be healed. There is a story of a woman who confessed, after many years, that she had critiqued every Mass she attended. Once she surrendered the habit, she said, "The altar felt alive again." This is the power of a heart returning to humility. And humility is precisely where the path turns. Because for every destructive burden, God offers an equal and greater remedy. 3 holy attitudes that restore what was damaged, protect the soul, and strengthen the entire community gathered around the Eucharist. The human heart is never meant to remain trapped in resentment, distraction, or judgment. Grace always offers a way back, a way to cleanse what has been wounded. And exorcists, along with the saints, speak of 3 holy attitudes that open the soul wide again. 3 dispositions that shift the entire atmosphere of a church, as surely as the destructive ones darken it. The first is reconciliation. Not the superficial kind, but the quiet, courageous act of choosing peace, even when the wound is old. When a Catholic approaches the altar with a reconciled heart, the whole pew feels lighter. A reconciled soul prays differently, with clarity, with sincerity, with a tenderness that ripples outward. Exorcists say even the smallest step toward forgiveness weakens the enemy's grip. The second is sacred attentiveness. This is not intense concentration or forced emotion. It is a serene, steady openness of heart, the willingness to let the liturgy speak and to let heaven press near. Some exorcists tell people to touch holy water before entering church, slow their breathing, or hold a rosary simply to anchor the mind in the sacred. Such practices do not earn grace. They clear space for grace to land. The third is a contemplative gaze. It is the habit of looking for Christ in every element of the Mass, even in imperfection. This gaze allows the soul to rise above the flaws of music, preaching, or decor. It sees the altar first, the cross first, the presence of Jesus first. And when one person prays with this gaze, unity strengthens around them like a shield. Father Amorth once said that the church becomes radiant when her people gather with hearts open, attentive, and humble. And indeed, these 3 attitudes, reconciliation, attentiveness, contemplation, carry a quiet power that restores the spiritual air of the entire congregation. Some people radiate darkness without meaning to, but others radiate grace without even knowing. And it is often the smallest signs that reveal which one sits beside you. When a soul enters the Mass, carrying either grace or turmoil, its presence rarely stays contained. Exorcists say there are subtle signals, almost imperceptible to the natural eye, that reveal what a person brings into the sacred space. The first sign is the atmosphere around them. A reconciled heart often brings a quiet peace that steadies the people nearby. But a heart burdened by resentment, distraction, or judgment can create the opposite. A heaviness that makes prayer feel harder, as if the air itself thickens. This weight is not emotional sensitivity. It is the spiritual climate shifting around a wounded interior. The second sign is the reaction of others. Exorcists observe that when someone carries inner turbulence, those seated close often grow restless, unfocused, or strangely uneasy without knowing why. The soul's interior storm ripples outward, touching the spiritual senses of those who are simply trying to pray. These signs are not meant to make us suspicious of others. They are invitations to tenderness, reminders that every person brings a story into the pew, and that the Church calls us to carry one another gently. And if these subtle signs have awakened something in your own heart, the moment for deeper honesty is close at hand. When exorcists speak about the hidden burdens people bring to Mass, they never end with fear. They end with an invitation, the quiet courage to look within and let God reorder what has grown crooked. Because every storm in the soul has a beginning, and every healing begins with honesty. The Church has always urged her children to pause before approaching the altar and ask 3 simple questions. Is my heart reconciled? Is my attention surrendered? Is my gaze fixed on Christ, not on flaws? A few minutes of reflection can change the entire course of a liturgy. Some Catholics sit in their car before Mass and breathe one prayer. Lord, scatter every darkness from my heart before I step into your sanctuary. Others touch holy water slowly, letting it wash the noise from their thoughts. Some whisper a Hail Mary to anchor their spirit in humility. These are not rituals of pressure. They are gestures of return, small acts that reopen the doors resentment shut, sharpen the mind, distraction dulled, and soften the heart, criticism hardened. And once the soul begins to turn back toward the light, something beautiful happens. Mass no longer feels distant or muted. Grace is no longer resisted. The altar draws near again. Which brings us to a truth every believer needs to hear before this message ends. Grace does not depend on perfection. It depends on a heart willing to be opened. When we lay down resentment, quiet our distractions, and surrender our judgments, the Mass becomes what it truly is, a meeting with the living God who still heals, still restores, still pours himself out for his people. If this message stirred something in you, subscribe, like, and share it so another soul can find clarity today. And write in the comments, Lord, guard my heart for the Mass. When you comment, you claim this grace for yourself, and you help carry it to someone who desperately needs it.